London, February 1775. Parliament has just received word of Congress's resolution that Americans should arm themselves. They do not see this as a gesture of loyalty. A report is sent to King George.
If the rabble in Boston is committed to open rebellion, then the king's honor and the safety of the empire require that force be met with force. They are a disorganized mob which cannot present a very great opposition to our regular troops. Perhaps it is better to bring on a small conflict now rather than later, when a rebellious spirit has had a chance to ripen. Proper, very proper.
The Continental Congress was regarded as an illegitimate body, a body that should not be negotiated with. There is a bitterness in Britain, a bitterness about being, in their eyes, let down. And again, we've got to remember, we're talking about 1775, 12 years before. As far as the British were concerned, they'd been at war with France, a war which, as far as they were concerned, and they were right, is a war that had developed because of North America. There is this great sense that they are being betrayed. There is they don't think they're taking part in some abstract constitutional debate. They see this as a crucial betrayal. They see this as a rebellion within the family. Indeed, an interesting point there, a lot of the British literature about the war is of a son who is rebelling against his father.
Parliament is running out of patience. They send another 1,000 soldiers to Boston, along with 3 new generals, Burgoyne, Clinton, and Howe. Throughout the colonies, people are preparing to defend themselves. Since the founding of the colonies, each province has had a militia to deal with local emergencies. Leaders of the protest now gain control of these militia and seize stores of guns and ammunition. Nicholas Cresswell, an English traveler, finds himself inconvenienced by the turmoil.
The people here are ripe for revolt. I hear nothing but oaths against England and her friends. The king is cursed in public. Everywhere the talk is of raising men and of war. Oh, at dinner I had a long argument with Mr. Jackson about the cause of all these troubles. I got the better of him, but I now realize he was simply trying to draw out my opinions. Now they all suspect me of being what they call a Tory spy. They watch my every move, and I'm threatened with tar and feathers and the devil knows what else. To add to my troubles, I have found that moths have eaten large holes in 2 of my suits. I have a violent pain. I must take a dose of salts. I vow never to talk politics again until I leave these cursed provinces.
In Massachusetts, where General Gage's troops still occupy Boston, the citizens are becoming increasingly defiant.
The Americans reacted stronger and stronger. It was a step of degree by degree. They would yell at the British on the street. They would walk up to the British at night in the taverns and give them their opinion of what they thought. It was getting worse and worse. And the British reacted. The British government told Gage, go out and show these local farmers what it's all about. The king's troops enforce the king's law. Get out there beyond Boston and show them what it's like.
April 19th, 1775. General Gage decides to send 700 soldiers into the countryside to capture a cache of arms. It is to be a minor operation. Their destination? Concord. A Boston silversmith, Paul Revere, and others hear of it and spread the word to the surrounding communities. On Lexington Green, the rebel militia under Captain Parker turns out to meet the British troops.
The British officers came up and went forward to Parker and they said, disperse ye rebels. Parker looked at his measly lineup of men versus this royal line with bayonets that were facing him. He turned to his troops and said, "Disperse." And they turned and started to disperse and walk away. And then someone fired the shot.
No one to this day knows who fired the first shot at Lexington, but perhaps a farmer tripped over his musket in retreating. Clearly, the colonials were giving ground. A gun went off, and then the British troops began firing. Their officers lost control of them.
Some of the British line fired, the Americans fired back, men dropped on both sides, and the battle had begun. The Americans ran, the British advanced with a bayonet, and the battle was all over.
No one had given orders for the attack. No one had given orders for the reply. But on this day, on Lexington Green, a political argument among members of the same family has become a blood feud. The British continue on to Concord to complete their work of capturing the store of munitions. By this time, word is out. The British are coming. The colonists swarm in around them. For the first time, the British are faced with a problem central to the entire revolution: how to subdue not just another army, but a population in rebellion.
Even the women had rifles. The enthusiastic zeal with which those people have behaved must convince every reasonable man what a difficult and unpleasant task we have before us. Arms will never enforce obedience, and only God in his infinite mercy can restore peace to this country again.
269 British soldiers are killed or wounded. The remains of their forces limp back to Boston.
Lexington Concord need not, I suppose, have been as major event as it was, but it came to be that. At the time, everyone understood that it was a major change.
Well, it initiated the revolution. There was no turning back from that moment on, it seemed. Once you had bloodshed, and the thing just started escalating. The suspicion, the anger, it couldn't be stopped, it seemed. Although there were efforts made, of course, still.
Throughout the colonies, news of Lexington and Concord spreads like wildfire. From all over New England, volunteers assemble. They march towards Boston and build camps across the river from the city. At Mount Vernon, George Washington writes to a close friend in England.
The brother's sword has been sheathed in the brother's breast. We now have a sad choice. Either we are to live as slaves, or the once happy plains of America are to be drenched in blood.
In May 1775, a Second Continental Congress meets in emergency session.
The delegates that come to Philadelphia again are in a state of agitation and anxiety. It's much different than a year ago for them. A die is being cast and the game is getting much more dangerous than anyone ever anticipated.
It is becoming clear that England will not back down. Congress decides that it must form a national army. It adopts the ragtag collection of volunteers camped around Boston. The choice of a general to lead this new army is crucial. John Hancock, as one of the wealthiest men in the colonies, feels he is the obvious choice. He is pleased when his fellow New Englander, John Adams, rises to nominate a candidate.
I told them that I had but one gentleman in mind, someone whose skill and experience, whose independent fortune, great talents, and excellent character would win the approval of all of America and unite the colonies better than any other person in the Union. As I spoke, I watched Hancock's face as he listened to me with visible pleasure. When I announced that this gentleman was from Virginia, his expression suddenly changed from pleasure to mortification and resentment. His mood was not helped when Samuel Adams seconded the motion.
John Adams would tell you that he made George Washington. But John Adams would tell you he made the revolution as well. John Adams, very adroitly, knowing that it was necessary to bring Virginia enthusiastically into the war, stood up and proposed a Virginian to command this New England army on Cambridge Common. And of course, everyone knew who that was. It was George Washington, who was conveniently enough standing there wearing his Virginia colonel's uniform, almost as a billboard of his availability.
George Washington certainly looks the part. At 6'3", he towers over the other delegates. Unfortunately, his record as an officer leaves much to be desired.
Certainly he had served in the military. He has defeated Fort Necessity, began the French and Indian War for all practical purposes. He was there at Braddock's defeat, 1755. I mean, it wasn't, he'd never commanded a successful operation of a major scale. He had military experience, yes, but it's a measure of how little successful large-scale military experience the Americans had, at least in terms of command, that he looked relatively qualified for this position.
Before setting out for Cambridge to take command of the army, the 43-year-old Washington sends a letter to his wife, Martha, at home in Mount Vernon.
Dearest Patsy, I am embarked on a wide ocean from which no safe harbor is to be found. As life is always uncertain, and common prudence dictates to every man the necessity of settling his temporal concerns, and, while the mind is calm and undisturbed, I have gotten Colonel Pendleton to draft a will, which I now enclose. The provision made for you in case of my death will, I hope, be agreeable. P.S. You will be happy to know that I've bought 2 suits of what I am told is the finest cloth. I am sure you will be pleased to hear that I paid 50 shillings a suit, which comes out to only 20 shillings a yard.